of God, we made them imams guiding by our command, and we revealed to them concerning the performance of good deeds, the maintenance of prayers, and the giving of zakat, and they used to worship us. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. We begin this night, like beginning every night, by passing our condolences first and foremost to our 12th holy Imam, Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajah al-Sharif, to our respected scholars, to our high maraja', to all the believers, especially those that helped in establishing this blessed gathering. Brothers and sisters, we've spoken in the previous nights about the roles of our imams and their achievements, from Imam Ali alayhi salam to Imam al-Hasan, and how they were able to preserve the religion of Islam through the stances that they made. We looked at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the danger that he faced during his time, why he had to make the stance that he made, the sacrifice that he made, and the achievements that we saw from that stance. We looked at the achievements that Imam al-Hussein made for the general benefit of Islam, that he was able to protect the values and principles of the Holy Prophet that are embodied in the Holy Scripture, in the Book of Allah, in the Holy Quran. How he was able to shake not just the conscience of every Muslim, but shake the roots of the governments of the time, of the government of Bani Umayyah, creating political instability that led to delegitimizing a government like Bani Umayyah, then leading to the diversity of opinions in Islam, through which the opinion of the Shia and the opinion of respect and honor to the Holy Quran emerged as the prominent opinion and the sole opinion in Islam, that we all as Muslims go back to the Holy Quran as the sole system of authority, followed by the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt. So that was the achievement of Imam al-Hussein. We spoke about that last night, and we said that it wasn't just about creating that shock and creating the denunciations and that stance against oppression, that stance against tyrannical governments. That wasn't just it. No, it was something more. It was about a divine purpose, because the Imam was acting in accordance and executing a divine plan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid for him, that was known to him since the time of his birth, that was foreseen and foretold of by the Holy Prophet, by Imam Ali, by Imam al-Hasan. Yes, that was what he was doing. That's the achievement that he sought to make. So the Imam renewed the faith of the Muslims. He renewed the religion of Islam by bringing them back to the Holy Quran, by bringing them back to the Holy Prophet. So that is the first part of Imam al-Hussein's achievement, because we said, when we were looking at the Imams, we said that their goal is to preserve Islam, and they preserve Islam by preserving the theoretical framework, by preserving the principles, by preserving the Holy Quran, firstly, and then secondly, by preserving and nurturing a group of individuals who hold on to these values, who practice these values, and who spread these values amongst others. So it is, in fact, the Shia who are these individuals that are meant to carry the message of Islam. So if Imam al-Hussein is meant to protect the theoretical framework and protect the Shia, let's turn today to Imam's movement and how he was able to strengthen and nurture the Shia through the stand and the sacrifice that he made. So, Imam al-Hussein gave us a great heritage, a heritage that we've been commemorating, that we've been mentioning as Shia for over 1,000 years. 1,384 years since the tragedy, we continue every year to mention Imam al-Hussein, to remember his name and remember his sacrifice. And the first thing that we as Shia take from this sacrifice is the same that all the other Muslims benefited from the sacrifice, which is understanding and knowing the Holy Quran as the sole source of legitimacy in Islam, understanding the Holy Quran as the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having that available and preserved for us. Because it was the Shia, starting with Imam Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen, during the time of the Prophet, after the time of the Prophet, that called people towards the Holy Quran, that understood that the Quran is the source of legitimacy, is the source of learning, is the source of values and principles. We said when we were talking about the stances of Imam Ali, when he was, after the death of the second Khalifa, when he was part of this Shura, the six individuals, the five other individuals in that Shura told Imam Ali, we'll allow you to be the third Khalifa if you agree to what? Upholding the Holy Quran, upholding the tradition of the Prophet, and upholding the precedent of the first two Khulafa. So they equated the first two Khulafa with the Quran and with the Prophet. Imam Ali said, no, if that's your condition, I won't accept your Khilafah. So from the beginning, the Imams and the Shia stood for the principle that the Quran is supreme and that nothing can be equated to the Quran. And that opinion won out in the end. The opinion of the Shia won out and became the prominent opinion of the Muslims. Why? Because of the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussein. So that was the first intellectual victory for the Shia that we draw from the tragedy of Karbala. What else? Imam al-Hussein allowed us to live these moments and for 1300 years to live in these gatherings, to remember his name. A remembrance that's not just emotional, because we do remember him emotionally. We are drawn to his tragedy. But this commemoration has become a school for us. It has become a source of learning. Because every lecture that's given for Imam al-Hussein isn't just about making people cry, but also has to have an intellectual element, reminding people of the principles of Islam, reminding people of the values of our Prophet and our Imams. And so, the second intellectual victory is the intellectual victory we gain from these majalis, from coming to these majalis and learning and understanding. So, we take from this our ability to look at the Holy Quran, hold it in such high respect, and not just respecting it. Because we don't just respect it as a book to be just kissed and put aside. No, we look at it as a true source of learning, as a true source of understanding. Because the Quran by itself, as we mentioned, the Quran by itself isn't necessarily accessible to every individual. So what do we need to do? We need to go back to the individuals that have the true and deep understanding of the Quran. We have to go back to the Holy Prophet, to his traditions. We have to go back to the Ahlul Bayt. If we want to go to the Quran, we have to go to them. Why? Because they're the individuals that can explain it to us. They're the individuals whose lives are intertwined with the Holy Quran. As the Prophet says, إِنِّي تَارِكُمْ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَةِ أَهْلَ بَيْتِي. I'm leaving for you two weighty things, the Holy Quran and my household. لَن يَفْتَرِقَا حَتَّى يَرِدَا عَلَيَّ الْحَوْضِ. They won't be separated until they come to me on the pool of paradise. So the Holy Quran won out as the supreme theoretical principle for the Muslims, but the Ahlul Bayt also won because they can't be divided, they can't be separated from the Holy Quran. So we gained this knowledge, this understanding that the Holy Quran is supreme. The Holy Quran holds primacy over everything else, and then followed by the traditions of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. The enemies of Tashayyu' and the enemies of Ahlul Bayt tried to put this intellectual movement down. They continued in their persecution of the Shia, persecution that we've spoken about, and persecution that continued not just in the direct aftermath of Karbala, but even to recent history, even to contemporary times. The Shia continue to be persecuted across the globe. Why? Because of this. So the Shia continue to be persecuted across time because of this intellectual movement that they hold. So people have tried to paint us Shia as, they call us polytheists, they call us fanatics, because of us holding the Ahlul Bayt in such high regard. But despite the persecution that we face, we continue to strengthen in our connection to this intellectual heritage, to our connection with the Ahlul Bayt. And this community and other communities across the globe are the perfect evidence for what I'm speaking about. Because how did this community, a community like this, form? How do communities halfway across the world from where the Prophet spread his message, where Karbala took place, how did such communities come to be? It was us, our fathers, our grandfathers, who were persecuted, whether physically, politically, economically, in those homelands that we came to establish a place for ourselves in this new homeland. And what did we do? We brought with us this intellectual heritage. We brought with us the memory of Imam al-Hussein. And so you see today that the Majlis of Imam al-Hussein aren't just in Karbala, aren't just in Iraq and the Middle East, but across the globe, from the most western places of the United States to the most eastern places in Australia. Everywhere across the globe, the Shia are commemorating Al-Imam al-Hussein, and they're remembering Al-Imam al-Hussein. So no matter how much we were persecuted, we persevered and we continued with this memory. This persecution didn't allow the government to bring back that religious legitimacy that was trying to create for itself. Didn't allow it to undo what Imam al-Hussein did with his stance. Even though they tried, the government tried to make us forget about the Holy Prophet, Imam Ali, Lady Fatima, Imam al-Hassan, but Imam al-Hussein's stance could not be forgotten, could not be ignored. He made a stance that shook us to our cores, so that when they tried to blind us from the truth of our Imams, Imam al-Hussein's movement and stance continued to be visible to everyone. And in fact, they tried to explain away Imam al-Hussein, to say that maybe there was a justification for Yazid, because they saw that if they were to give legitimacy to Imam al-Hussein, it would delegitimize Yazid and the Khulafa and the entire school of thought built on that. And if they were to give legitimacy to Yazid, that would delegitimize Imam al-Hussein, which is clearly absurd from knowing his movement and his stance. So they came to this confused reasoning that both Imam al-Hussein and Yazid were legitimate in what they did. Something that can't be held true. Imam al-Hussein and his enemies can't both be righteous individuals. That's not something that's accepted logically by any individual. But that's the position that they tried to impose, a position that's so shaky that we all here see the fallacy of that reasoning. So all of this is just the intellectual achievements that we took from the movement of Imam al-Hussein. But Imam al-Hussein's movement isn't just intellectual. The emotions and the passion that come with the movement of Imam al-Hussein are at the center of what he wanted to achieve. He wanted to create for the Shia this emotion, this passion that would drive them forward, that would nurture this identity, nurture this community to become true Shia and true followers of the Imams. And so we see that the Shia were always at the forefront of their communities. They're always the most knowledgeable, the most pious, and we mentioned some historians, for example, that would say that the narrators of Kufa, the Shia narrators of Kufa, were the most trusted. Why? Even though they had a different ideology, but they were the most truthful individuals. And so they'd be the individuals who are trusted with the hadith. And the Shia always gave martyrs, always gave individuals who would sacrifice everything for the sake of principle. And of course, the best illustration of that is Imam al-Hussein. But even Imam al-Hussein's movement, when he gave that ultimate sacrifice, it was, yes, for the sake of Islam generally, but also for the sake of Tashayyu' specifically. And Imam al-Hussein, when he set out and he said, I'm not coming out as a revolutionary, as a corrupter or as an oppressor, لا ظالما ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله. I set out to seek reform in the nation of my grandfather, وأنهى أأمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي وأبي علي بن أبي طالب. I want to take the path of my grandfather Rasulullah, and my father Ali ibn Abi Talib. The memory and the mention of Ali ibn Abi Talib was always there with the Prophet in Imam al-Husayn's movement and speeches, in his letters to the people of Kufa, and the stances of Lady Zainab in Kufa and Damascus, and the stances of Imam al-Sajjad. When people didn't know or recognize Imam al-Sajjad, how would he describe himself? He would say that I'm the son of Zamzam wa Safa, Makkah wa Mina, I'm the son of the Prophet, and then what? أنا ابن من ضرب بين يدي رسول الله بسيفين وطعن برمحين وهاجر الهجرتين أنا ابن أول القوم إسلاما. I am the son of the individual who protected the Prophet. I am the son of the first Muslim. And so they always invested in Imam Husayn's movement to what? Remind people of the principles of Tashayyu', remind people of the Ahlul Bayt, of the second thaql that is with the Holy Quran, to remind people to go back to the individuals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected, that the Holy Prophet selected as his successors. So the movement of Imam al-Husayn and the movement of the Imams after them was focused also on nurturing the Shia as a group, not just for the general benefit of Islam, but the Shia as a group of individuals who would hold this truth and carry it forward was in focus for Imam al-Husayn and for the Imams after him. The governments of the time and the scholars that were paid off by the governments at the time realized this. And they saw that the mentioning of Imam al-Husayn was only strengthening this movement that was contrary to what they wanted, that was undermining their ambitions. And so they would try to take the Shia and take the Muslims in general away from Imam al-Husayn and tell them that no, don't mention Imam al-Husayn, don't remember Imam al-Husayn. A scholar by the name of al-Ghazali, a non-Shia scholar by the name of al-Ghazali, would say it is impermissible for a preacher or anyone else to recite the story of Husayn's massacre and the other narration. So he would say it's haram to remember Imam al-Husayn. The fact that it's true, the fact that it holds such high morals, not something that he's considering, but he's saying it's haram. Why? He's saying in narrations that of what had occurred between companions of disputes and enmity. So also Imam Ali and Muawiyah and their disputes and their wars, that's haram to recite. That would surely incite detestation of the companions and criticism of them. If this is going to lead to people criticizing the companions, then it's haram. The disputes amongst them must be correctly rationalized, he would say. So don't mention Imam al-Husayn, but try to rationalize it. Try to rationalize these disputes. Try to give justification for Muawiyah for going up against Imam Ali. Try to give justifications for Yazid for what he did to Imam al-Husayn. Why? Because Imam al-Husayn's movement was clearly destabilizing everything that they've built in terms of this school of thought of Khilafah. It was giving power to the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt that was contrary to everything that they were building. Of course, such justifications are clearly false. Don't need to go into how that could be. How could an individual even rationalize and justify these crimes that took place against Imam al-Husayn? An individual who tries to justify that is only going to be complicit in what happened to Imam al-Husayn. So those justifications never stood the test of time. They also tried to distract the Muslims. How? By creating false narrations that say that, for example, the 10th of Muharram is a day of celebration because Prophet Adam was forgiven on that day, because Noah's flood ended on that day, because Prophet Ismail was saved and a new sacrifice was given instead of him on that day. So it should be a day of celebration. So they tried to convince the Muslims of that. And unfortunately, for individuals that haven't held on to the Ahlul Bayt, to their true teachings, they fell victim to these lies. And so even to this day, we find that there are many Muslims who won't commemorate the tragedy of Imam al-Husayn, that would even celebrate Not celebrate the tragedy that took place, but celebrate because they were duped by these lies that said this is a day of celebration because Allah chose this day for such great things. Even you'll find some prominent individuals, and I won't mention name, but some even prominent individuals from other schools of thought, even in the West, they would make, even today in contemporary times, they'd make social media posts about how great the 10th of Muharram is and how people should celebrate it and fast it and all these things that happened, and they wouldn't even mention what happened to Imam al-Hussein. Why? Following this precedent set by al-Ghazali, by these scholars, those governments, that Imam al-Hussein should be forgotten and instead his day should be celebrated. So they did all this to try to keep the emotions connected with Imam al-Hussein down, to put us down and put this passion that's driven by Imam al-Hussein in his massacre, so that we won't use it to continue in the path that was drawn for us by Imam al-Hussein. But that didn't stop us. That didn't stop us as Shia. No matter how much they tried to lie and deceive, that didn't stop us. No matter how much they tried to persecute, that didn't stop us. Again, the existence of communities like this one that came from distant lands and established a new home for themselves, a home that's built around the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein. The Imam al-Hussein Foundation here is given that name to remember that stance, to remember that tragedy that took place, to remember the values and the principles that the Imam stood for. So we as Shia took Imam al-Hussein's stance and we invested it for our growth as Muslims, as individuals, as followers of the Ahl al-Bayt. And we continued to spread that message. And today you'll see these majalis taking place in every corner of the world. Right now, this city of Windsor, I'm not familiar exactly with how many centers there are here, but I'll say maybe there are a few hundred individuals present right now. There's a program that's before this one, there's a program that's after it. How many individuals are participating in just this city? How many other majalis are in this city? Across the border, Detroit, Dearborn, where I'm from. One year I remember, I don't know the count this year, but I remember a few years ago, we counted the number of majalis, 17 majalis in Detroit and Dearborn. 17 majalis, all packed, alhamdulillah. So some people say, why do we have so many mosques, so many centers? But if they're all packed, what's wrong with that? All thousands of individuals in these two cities are commemorating Imam al-Hussein. It's just one location. And you see that throughout, not just Canada and the US, not just the Middle East, but even the Far East, even places like Australia, even in remote villages in Africa and Kenya, places that don't have electricity or water actually has Shia, people that are commemorating Imam al-Hussein on these days. And we've seen that firsthand. I work with a foundation called the Mainstay Foundation. We build wells for individuals that don't have running water in Africa, and we've seen that there's actually Shia commemorating this tragedy on this day. I have a friend who came to the US to study medicine from Iraq. Before coming to the US, he was in Ukraine, and he was telling me about the majalis of the Shia in Ukraine. So every corner of the world, places you wouldn't even think about or imagine, there are majalis for Imam al-Hussein now, in these days, commemorating his tragedy, understanding his principles, understanding his sacrifices. So that's what was built, was given to us by the Imams, by Imam al-Hussein and the rest of the Imams. Because the rest of the Imams didn't just sit home after the massacre of Karbala. No, they knew how to invest it. They knew how to take the massacre and carry it forward for us to learn from, for us to gain from. Imam al-Sajjad didn't just retreat and step back when he saw what happened to his father. No, Imam al-Sajjad was an active part of spreading the message of Tashayyu', not just through his stances in Kufa and Damascus, but through the supplications that he would teach, and he would teach the morals that we live by. For example, the book of, if you've heard of it, the Treatise of Rights, where he gives us the rights that we should hold to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to our Prophet, the rights that we should hold to each other, to our individual body parts. He taught us those ethics. He didn't just sit back. He taught us those ethics through supplications. Some of the most beautiful supplications that we recite as Shia, Dua Abi Hamza al-Thamali, for example, are taught to us by Imam al-Sajjad. So he took what happened to him and his family and his father, and he invested it for us to teach us the values and the principles of the Ahlul Bayt. So, we as Shia, we gather, we remember, we cry, but how can we invest that, and how can we learn from that, and how can we practically use that for our betterment and for our strength as a community? How do these commemorations, this heritage, how does it strengthen us as individuals and as a community? These commemorations draw us in emotionally. The emotions behind the tragedy, the passion behind the tragedy, bring us in to these gatherings, to these centers. And then we carry it forward. How? By imbuing, by placing in these commemorations an intellectual element. Because again, we're not just here to remember and to weep and to cry. No, we're here to advance ourselves through that memory. So we always have an intellectual element, an element of learning, an element of spiritual and ethical reminders, of morals, of values, of principles, that has to be with that spiritual, with that emotional aspect of the commemoration, of the majalis. So there always has to be an element of self-development for each individual who's in these majalis. So through that, that's how the Shia became the most knowledgeable, the most respected, the most pious in their communities. That's why people would look up to them in their respective communities, whether or not they knew that they were Shia. But these were individuals clearly of high morals. That's how we need to be. That's what we need to learn and take away from these majalis. So, to be engaged with our faith is one of the first achievements that Imam al-Hussein gave us. Because we're all engaged in our religion, in our school of thought, through these commemorations. That's the first thing. If you ask a Shi'i, when do you go and commemorate, go to the mosque? Outside the regular daily prayers, the weekly prayers, it's Muharram, it's Ashura that we commemorate. But it's not just Ashura, it's not just Muharram, but other commemorations. Commemorations take from Ashura to the commemorations on Safar, the martyrdom of Imam al-Hasan, Arba'in, the passing of the Prophet, Fatimiyya, and so on. Throughout the year, we have commemorations that draw us in emotionally and engage us with our religion. And it's not just commemorations. We're not just about crying and weeping, because there are also celebrations that give us joy and bring us in for those joyous occasions. Celebrations such as Eid al-Ghadir, such as the birth of Imam al-Hasan in Ramadan, birth of Imam al-Mahdi, the birth of Imam al-Hussein, the birth of Imam Ali in Rajab. So these celebrations also trigger our passions and refuel us and bring us back so that we can learn more, so that we can develop ourselves. And in that, we as Shia have been united. We as Shia across the globe have been united in our message and in this cause that we've adopted, that is about the Ahlul Bayt, the oppression that took place against them, and their right and understanding who they are, because they are the individuals that lead us to the Holy Prophet, that lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're united in that message as Shia. Just again, take the example of this center and look around you. How many people did it take as a united effort to put this program together? For me to get up here and speak, it took at least maybe a dozen individuals, maybe a couple dozen individuals to organize, to volunteer, to put their time and their effort into establishing this place. And it's not just about the individuals who put their time, but there are individuals that stood behind them and supported them financially. because someone had to pay the bills, someone had to keep the lights on. So the donors stood behind the volunteers to allow them to do what they did and to allow them to establish this gathering. Every night I begin by passing condolences to the 12th Holy Imam, of course, to our scholars, to the believers, but especially the ones that helped establish this gathering. Because it's you who allowed for the message of Imam al-Hussein to reach, for the achievement of Imam al-Hussein to take fruition. It's your actions. It's your actions that bring life to his memory. And it's not just about volunteering and donating, because everyone who is present here, everyone that took time from his day and traveled and came to this place to commemorate with us, you're participating, you're giving life. You're part of enabling these programs, because without an audience, such a program wouldn't be a success. So every single individual here, whether you drove through a storm, whether you drove from a distant place, you drove for maybe a half hour, more or less, you took time, you took the effort to be part of this, to support Imam al-Hussein and his movement and his message. So everyone, every single individual here is part of that, part of establishing these majalis, part of carrying forward the Imam's stance and his sacrifice and his achievement. So in all of this, we're united as a community. And I'm speaking of just this singular community in this city, just this foundation. I'm not sure how many other centers and majalis are here in this city. Again, 17 or more or less in Detroit. There's just 2 cities. Across the US, across the globe, all the Shia are united in their efforts in giving their time, their power, their energy, their wealth to establishing these gatherings, to establishing schools in the name of Lady Fatima al-Zahra, to establishing orphanages in the name of Imam Ali, to feeding the poor in the name of Imam al-Hassan. So we're all united in this common cause. And what gives us a deeper sense of unity is that we're united in a common identity as Shia. Because one of the things that mold our identity as a Shi'i is this commemoration of Imam al-Hussein. A Shi'i is an individual who remembers an Imam al-Hussein and his family. A Shi'i is an individual who knows and learns and understands this movement, who yearns for something like a ziyarah, to go and to visit those holy places and to benefit from the blessing of being there. Those are things that are at the core of our identity as Shia. The commemoration, the aza, the ziyarah. It's at the core of being a Shi'i. So this devotion to the Ahlul Bayt, in bringing life to their memory, in visiting their graves, in seeking them as a means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what forms us as Shia. So in all of this, the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein took a central role. And I'll give you one example. Not too far into the past, maybe 20 years ago, the Shia in Iraq were under a tyrannical government, the Ba'athist regime. They weren't able to fully participate in the commemoration of Imam al-Hussein. And so an event, many of you know about Ziyarat al-Arba'in, the millions of individuals that walk to Imam al-Hussein every year. 20 years ago, under the Ba'athist regime, it was only a handful that would go. Only a handful. 20 years later, after the fall of the regime, you see, and less than, actually it's been going on for years now. Less than 20 years it took for the Shia to come back from that repression, from that oppression, and for millions of individuals to go and visit Imam al-Hussein. Why? Because Imam al-Hussein lives in their identity. That's why the Shia can't be summed up in a single scholar or in a single institution. Again, Ba'athist regime came to power, assassinated many scholars, imprisoned many scholars. The holy city of Najaf, which was the center of learning for Tashayyu' since the time of Sheikh Tusi dwindled because of the oppression and persecutions. What did the Shia do? They simply went and turned towards the city of Qom. And then, when the Ba'athist regime fell, again, people and scholars returned to the city of Najaf, and the city of Najaf flourished again. No matter what persecution we faced, because of this identity that the Imams had carved for us, had given us through the tragedy of Ashura, through the stance of Imam al-Hussein, we were always able to persevere. So Imam al-Hussein's stance and movement was a watershed for the Muslims as a whole and for the Shia specifically. It was a moment of change in history. It gave us as Shia this ability and platform to engage with our religion. It gave us this unity that brings us all together, and it gave us this identity that we hold as Shia, as followers of Imam al-Hussein. And so Imam al-Hussein's movement is a true embodiment of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ألم ترى كيف ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء تؤتي أكلها كل حين بإذن ربها. Have you not seen how Allah draws a parable, an example? A good word is like a good tree. The good word of Imam al-Hussein is like a good tree. Its roots are steady and its branches are in the sky. It gives its fruit every season by the leave of its Lord. So the fruits of Imam al-Hussein, of his stance, of his sacrifice, we see every season of tragedy, every year of commemoration, we see the roots and the benefits of Imam al-Hussein. We see the truth of his words when he said that he's setting out to be, when he sets out, he was going to be a martyr, but through that, he was going to achieve a triumph. This is the triumph that the Imam achieved. This is how he preserved Islam, how he preserved not just Islam theoretically as a thought, but Islam practically as a group of individuals who held on to the truth, who practiced the truth as the Shia. This is how Imam al-Hussein allowed us and nurtured us as Shia. And this is also the best illustration of the words of Lady Zainab, who was narrating actually from the Holy Prophet. They say that after the massacre of Karbala, when the caravan was being taken, Imam al-Sajjad looked to the bodies on the ground. Lady Zainab looked to him, saw the sorrow on his face, and she told him about this narration from the Holy Prophet, where he says, ثم يبعث الله قوما يقيمون رسما لقبر سيد الشهداء يكون علما لأهل الحق وسببا للمؤمنين إلى الفوز. The Holy Prophet says that after the massacre there will be a people who will build the grave of Imam al-Hussein and take it as a beacon for the truth and a cause for victory, for success in this world and the hereafter. This is what Lady Zainab was talking about. These majalis, these commemorations, this is the true achievement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So, Imam al-Hussein set out to execute a divine plan, something that was foretold by his grandfather Rasulullah, that he will make that ultimate sacrifice to preserve the religion of Islam. And in fact, he did, through preserving the theoretical principles and the understanding of the Holy Quran, as well as preserving us and nurturing us as Shia. That is Imam al-Hussein's movement, and that was his success that he gained through the ultimate sacrifice. That's why we commemorate him every year. And inshallah, this gave us a better understanding of our identity as Shia, and a better understanding of why we come to these majalis and we remember the tragedy. 1300 years and more, why we mourn for Imam al-Hussein. Now, on this night, we mourn specifically Imam al-Hussein's son, Ali al-Akbar. Imam al-Hussein set out for the city of Kufa. He set out and he was stopped in Karbala. He set out with his entire family. He had with him the women, the children, his brothers, his nephews, and with them was his eldest son, Ali al-Akbar. And Ali al-Akbar was a man of strength, a man of bravery, and a man of faith. They say that on the route to Karbala, when they were stopped by the enemies, Imam al-Hussein was saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So there was some grief that Ali al-Akbar saw in the face of Imam al-Hussein. He asked his father, Alasna ala al-haq? Are we not on the true path? Imam al-Hussein said, yes. What did Ali al-Akbar respond? إذن لا نبالي أوقعنا على الموت أم وقع الموت علينا. Then we don't care as long as we are on the truth. We don't care whether we fall into death or death falls on us. We don't care how our death is going to be, as long as we follow this path of truth. Yes, that was the faith of Ali al-Akbar. And so, in the land of Karbala, on the 10th of Muharram, when the companions had went and made their sacrifice and made their stance, and Imam al-Hussein was left with just his family, the first individual that would go and sacrifice for his father, Imam al-Hussein, is Ali al-Akbar. Imam al-Hussein didn't allow for his other family members to give that sacrifice before he sacrificed his son first. So Ali al-Akbar would be the first individual to enter the battlefield. It was said that Ali al-Akbar was the individual that looked most like the Holy Prophet. So when Ali al-Akbar went out into the battlefield, Imam al-Hussein raised his hand and said, "Oh Allah, bear witness that these individuals are facing the individual that looks most like your messenger." Ali al-Akbar asked permission from his father. He went into the battlefield. He went, fought bravely, and then after slaying dozens of enemies, he came back to his father. He said, "Father, I'm tired, I'm thirsty." Imam Hussein said, I don't have any water to give you. But since you've come back, go and see your mother. Go and visit your mother. He would go to the tent. He would see his mother. He would find her praying. All she was saying, all she was supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, bring me back my son." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted his prayer, answered her prayer, gave her back her son to say his final farewell. Then he went back into the battlefield. They say that he was struck, he fell, he caught on to the neck of his horse. The horse was covered in blood. Its eyes were covered in blood. It didn't know where it was going. It took him into the enemy camp. And so the enemies of Allah began to strike him one by one. So many wounds, they wouldn't be counted. His body wouldn't even be recognized from all the stabbing and all the wounds of the enemies. Imam al-Hussein would rush to him. Ali al-Akbar would yell, "Assalamu alayka ya Aba ya Hussein." Imam al-Hussein would gallop to him, he would rush to him. But then he would find him that from all these wounds, he has passed away and he has met with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam al-Hussein would say, "Bunay Ali, bunay ala dunya ba'daka al-afa." This world is nothing without you, the Imam says. He lost his eldest son. The joy of his heart, the apple of his eye, was slain in the land of Karbala. What would Imam al-Hussein do? He would take the body of Ali al-Akbar, take it back to the camp, and then he would call the women of Ahlul Bayt, come and weep, come and grieve for your lost son. Yes, they would come, they would weep. The mother of Ali al-Akbar, she would weep for her son. What would she say? The poet describes, "Ya ibni al-Akbar, ya Badr Sa'd اللي غاب, والله ما أقدر الله يا فقد الشباب, لأجلك أسهر يما واحمل هالعذاب." Oh my son, oh al-Akbar, you're like my shining moon that I've lost. I can't bear the tragedy of your loss. You were the one that I'd stay up the nights to make sure that you're okay. And now all I see is your bleeding body. How would he respond? Again, the poet describes, "Ibshababi اذكري أم البتول، مو عذابي بقد حزن بنت الرسول، وبغيابي أنا للزهرة شقول. Yes, the poet describes as if Ali al-Akbar is reminding her, I'm not the first individual of the Ahlul Bayt to pass away this young. Remember my grandmother, Lady Zahra, who passed away at the age of 18. Remember her sorrows, remember her tragedies. Yes, on such a night, we commemorate with Imam al-Hussein, we weep with Lady Zahra, we commemorate the tragedies, the tragedy of Ali al-Akbar and the rest of the household of Ahlul Bayt.
Gave him a hopeless stare and began weeping. It is said that Abu Abdullah said to Ali al-Akbar, Bunay Ali, ilayya, ilayya. Bunay Ali, ilayya, ilayya. Son Ali, come to me, come to me. أودعك وتودعني، أشمك وتشمني. Let me bid you farewell and you bid me farewell. Let me smell you as you smell me. أجركم. The father and the son embraced each other and began weeping together. When the women realized that Ali al-Akbar alayhi salam was about to go, seeing the copy of Rasulullah about to leave this world, they surrounded Ali, telling him, have mercy upon us, have mercy upon us. We cannot bear to be separated from you, and we are strangers in this land. But Ali alayhi salam had to go forth to defend his Imam. Ajarakumullah. Ali alayhi salam descended. When he descended, Abu Abdullah began weeping bitterly. He turned towards Umar bin Saad, telling him, Malak, what is wrong with you? May Allah bereave you of your kindred, just as you've made me bereft of mine. May Allah bereave you of your kindred, just as you've disrespected my relationship with Rasulullah. May Allah set an adversary upon you who will slaughter you on your mattress. Then Abu Abdullah turned in supplication to Allah, saying, Allahumma ashhad ala haula. Oh Allah, bear witness that he who has emerged is bearing the closest likeness to your Prophet in physical appearance, morals, and speech. Hence, whenever we would yearn to see your Prophet, we would look at him. He supplicated against them. Ali alayhi salam descended. One of the enemies called him Ali. You are related to the commander of the faithful, Yazid. And if you want, we can grant you amnesty. Ali al-Akbar replied, the kinship of Rasulullah is second to none. And he descended calling out, Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali, nahnu wa bayat Allah bin Nabi. I am Ali, son of Hussein, son of Ali. I swear by Allah, we are more worthy of being the caliphs of the Prophet. Tallahi la يحكم فينا ابن الداعية أضربكم بالسيف بالسيف أحامي عن أبي. I swear by Allah, Ubaidullah bin Ziyad will not rule over us. I strike you with my sword as I defend my father. ضرب غلام هاشمي قرشي. I strike you the strike of a youth from Hashim and Quraysh. Ajarakumullah. Aba Abdullah was gazing at Ali al-Akbar, rejoicing for what Ali was doing to the enemy. Although he was alone, Ali alayhi salam was slaughtering the enemies. He was butchering them. Naam, he killed 120 on his own. Layla, the mother of Ali, was in her tent, looking at the face of Abu Abdullah. So long that Hussein rejoiced, she knew that Ali was fine. All of a sudden, Ajarakumullah, the face of Abu Abdullah changes. Layla addresses him, Abu Abdullah, has anything happened to my son? He says, no, oh Layla. However, he is facing a fierce opponent. Layla, supplicate for your son, for the supplication of a mother is answered when supplicating for her son. Layla alayha salam retreated into the camp. She raised her hands towards the sky. She said, بعطش أبي عبد الله إلهي بغربتي أبي عبد الله يا رد يوسف إلى يعقوب اردد إلي ولدي علي. Oh Allah, my God, I ask you for the sake of Abi Abdullah's thirst, for the sake of Hussein's loneliness, oh He who brought Joseph back to Jacob, bring me back my son Ali. والله وتوسلت لله بحبيبه وبحبيبه وتوسلت لله بحبيبه وبالحسين وش ما به مصيبه يا رايد يوسف من مغيبه ليعقوب ومسدش النحيبه اريد انا علي سالم تجيبه. Ajarakumullah. Ali alayhi salam slew the enemy and returned to his father. Yes, the supplication of Layla was answered, but how did he return? He came back saying, Abba, al-atash qad qatalani. But father, thirst has killed me, and the heaviness of the armor and the steel has exhausted me. Is there a way to get a drink of water so I may gain strength and return to the enemy? Ya Buya, ya Buya, ya Buya, ya Buya, شربت مي الجبد اتقوى ورد للمعدة عيان وحدي. The poet says Ali was saying, Father, I am burning from inside. I am in need of a drink of water to gain strength. What does Hussein answer? والله يقل سهلة يا ابويا طلبتك هاي. What an easy request is this request, Ya Ali. ولكن يا عقلي وما يا عيناي أنا منين أجيب شربة الماء Son Ali, from where can I get you water? والعطش مثلك يبس حشاي. Son Ali, I am also burning like you. I am burning from thirst. When Ali al-Akbar said this word to Abu Abdullah, Imam al-Hussein appealed for help, calling out, Wa Ghawtha, from where can I get you water? Go back and fight for a little while, for soon you shall meet your grandfather Rasulallah, who shall water you with a cup, after which you will never feel thirst. Ajarakumullah. Before returning to the battlefield, Abu Abdullah tells him, Ali, go to your mother. He enters the tent only to find Layla unconscious. Ali sits beside Layla. He places her head in his lap. It is said he sheds a tear. He cries and the tears of Ali fall on the cheeks of Layla. Layla alayha salam opens her eyes. Subhanallah. It is her beloved son. Her beloved son is beside her. Naam, she bids him farewell. All of a sudden, he hears a call. Amam al-Nasir yansuruna. Amam al-Rahim yarhamuna. Isn't there anyone who will support us? Who is this? Abu Abdullah. He's calling for help. Ali alayhi salam rises. He goes to his father. Naam. And he returns to the battlefield. But before going, he utters one word which breaks the heart of Abu Abdullah. He says, Father, take good care of my mother Layla after me. Then he goes to the battlefield. Naam, he destroys the enemy. The enemy becomes confused. Who is this person fighting? Is it Ali ibn al-Hussein or is it Ali ibn Abi Talib? Ajarakumullah. As he was fighting, Murrah bin Munqidh al-Abdi, may Allah's curse descend upon him, says, I will bear the sins of the Arabs if I do not bereave his father. Hamid bin Muslim, who was standing beside him, tells him, why would you do so? These people will slay him. Murrah says, no, I will do it. Ajarakumullah. He approaches Ali from behind. He stabs the back of Ali with the spear. Aywa Aliyah wa Sayyidah. He strikes him on his head. Ali alayhi salam's head opens. Ali embraces his horse. The blood of Ali covers the eyes of the horse. Where does the horse take him? Instead of taking him to the camp of Hussein, it takes him to the camp of the enemies. Now the enemies have their chance to take their rage on Ali. They start striking Ali al-Akbar and they sever him into pieces. Aywa Aliyah wa Madlumah. Ali alayhi salam calls out, Alayka minni salam, Aba Abdullah. Peace be upon you, O Father, Aba Abdullah. Here is my grandfather Rasulallah, who has given me a cup of water, after which I will never feel thirst. And he tells you, hurry, O Hussein, for there is a cup waiting for you. Ajarakumullah. I do not know what happened to Aba Abdullah. What did his heart feel? Sukaina says, when Aba Abdullah heard the call of Ali, he stood and sat down, calling out, Wa walada, my son. Ali alayhi salam. Aba Abdullah ascends his horse and goes with Banu Hashim towards Ali al-Akbar. Aba Abdullah rushes, calling out, my son Ali, my son Ali. When he arrives at the scene, what does Hussein do? Does he descend from the horse? No. Aba Abdullah jumps on the body of Ali. He places his cheek on the cheek of Ali al-Akbar. He places his chest on the chest of Ali. He sees the blood of Ali. The body parts are severed. Wa wailah. He says, Bunay Ali, son Ali, hoping to hear one last word. Ali does not answer. He says, son Ali. Ali does not answer. And so he says, Bunay Ali, ala dunya ba'daka al-afa. My son Ali, life is not worth living after you. ما أجرأهم على الرحمن وعلى انتهاك حرمة الرسول. My son Ali, how dare they encroach upon Allah and upon the sanctity of His messenger. It is dear upon your father and grandfather that you call them, but they do not answer you, that you call for help, and that you call for help, but they do not help you. Then he said a heartbreaking word. He told Banu Hashim, O youth of Banu Hashim, come and lift Ali, pick him up, for I do not have the energy to do so. Aba Abdullah, you are the one, you are the son of he who picked up the gate of Khaybar, yet you cannot pick up your son Ali. Naam, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein was completely devastated, and so Banu Hashim lifted the body parts of Ali and took them to the tent. Asharakumullah. When the women see Ali's body, they emerge from the tent. Hamid bin Muslim says, as if I see a lady coming out from the tent, leading all other women. She is walking towards the body of Ali, calling out, Wa walada, my son, my nephew, O fruit of my heart, Wa muhjata qalbah. She comes to the body of Ali and falls on him, cuddling Ali al-Akbar. I ask, who is this lady? Only to be told that is his aunt Zainab. Aywa Zainabah wa Aliyah. Aba Abdullah weeps for Zainab. Allahu Akbar. He takes her hand and brings her into the tent, as if I see them embracing each other. Each one is crying on the shoulder of the other, as if Aba Abdullah tells her, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ya Zainab, Ali rah, Ali rah. يا اختي ظلمت الدنيا عليا، يا اختي إذ لمت الدنيا عليا. Zainab, Ali is gone, ya Zainab. Ali has departed and the world has darkened in my eyes. May Allah help Layla, Sukaina and the rest of the women when they see Ali in that state. Let me conclude for you with this tragedy. It is said when Hussein reached the body of Ali al-Akbar, Salamullahi alayh, there was a bit of life left in Ali. A few seconds. Naam, a few seconds of his life or minutes were left. And so Abu Abdullah, Salamullahi alayh, sees Ali al-Akbar smiling. Then he sees him weeping. He tells him, Bunay, why did you smile and then cry? Ali alayhi salam tells him, I smile because I see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi giving me the cup of water. As for the tear, I cry because I see my grandmother Fatima az-Zahra sitting beside you, slapping her head, saying, Wa ghariba, mourning Abu Abdullah. Ya Fatima, ya Fatima, ya Fatima. ونادت زينب الكبرى بصوت على ليلى وأدمعها تسيل. The poet says Zainab called Layla, Layla, come quickly, as her tears were pouring. تنادي تقول لها اسرعي هذا علي الشبيه المصطفى الهادي قتيل. Layla, come quickly, Ali al-Akbar has returned. But ya Layla, be ready, for Ali al-Akbar has been killed. Layla, prepare yourself, for the body parts of Ali have been severed. Aywa Ali, wa madluma. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك بأحب الخلق إليك محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين والتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. فرج عنا يا الله. We ask Allah Ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman, to make us from His sincere followers and supporters. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to heal the sick for the sake of Fatima al-Alila alayha salam. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to fulfill our needs. If anyone has a need, and we all have needs, ask it at the moment and Allah will answer you. Allahumma بحق شبيه النبي شبيه الرسول علي الأكبر المظلوم اقضي حاجة كل محتاج يا كريم، لا سيما حوائج من سألنا الدعاء. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the souls of all those who have passed away from the believers, especially our dear family members and those who are completely forgotten and never mentioned. We shall recite Surah Al-Fatiha and send its rewards and the rewards of our Majlis to their graves after that. Salawat ala Muhammad.